These are some of the greatest gardens in Britain. From a ducal castle to a garden once lost in time. From a modern masterpiece to a plantsman's paradise. We've searched out the finest in the land. Each has its own unique story to tell.
Oh, it's delightful.
Join me, Carol Klein, on a journey through the 4 seasons.
Woo!
As I experience a year in their lives. Meet the people who look after them.
This is the season which seems to be attached to my soul.
This is my midlife crisis bit, really.
Glimpse what goes on behind the scenes.
Come on, share your secrets.
Reflect on their magnificent designs and celebrate the plants that make each so special.
As I look through these massive pinnacles of flower, I can see the pinnacles themselves. Serendipity.
From up and down the land, these are great British gardens, waiting to be discovered.
I'm really looking forward to it. Bet you are too.
In the east of England, in the county of Norfolk, is a world-renowned Great British Garden. This is Bressingham Gardens, a 17-acre garden paradise and home to a family of horticultural heroes who pioneered the way we garden today. Bressingham Hall has been the home of the Bloom family since 1946. They're a dynasty of Norfolk horticulturalists with a passionate desire to introduce the British gardening public to better plants used in more innovative ways. For many gardeners, it's hard to imagine just how much this family and this place have done to shape how we garden now. It's a spectacular sight, an oasis of delights shining out from the flatlands of Norfolk. It's planted with love and care, and to be enjoyed in every season. It's a landscape of 2 exquisite halves. Surrounding Bressingham Hall are acres of beds and borders. There are gardens for winter, for summer, and for fragrance. Then, as you journey on, the vistas unfold, with 6 acres of towering trees and spectacular shrubs. I'm starting my autumn visit in the Dell Garden near the Hall, laid out by the late Alan Bloom. These beds epitomise what this place is all about, showcasing the very best of plants, displayed in ways we can all try to emulate.
How's this for a resplendent red-hot poker? It's very, very aptly named, isn't it? This one is Nefophia ruperi, and it's one of the biggest and the brightest and the best of them all. It's the last to flower, and talk about saving the best till last. I love these great torches, coral and orange at first, and brilliant yellow. And even when they start to fade, they don't look at all dishevelled. They really announce the autumn. And I love the way you can glimpse that Nefophia. It sort of shines through this beautiful grass. This is Miscanthus nepalensis. These bronzy tassels just hang there in the breeze and waft backwards and forwards. And the colour is perfect, both with the red hot poker and with this lovely little chrysanth. This is Paul Boisset. I love that kind of rusty colour. And again, chrysanths always remind me of the autumn. I think they do everybody. It's the smell of them as well, apart from the colours. Alan Bloom actually had a lot to do with introducing hardy chrysanths to the British public. And here, this combination, I'm sure he would have been totally proud of. It's absolutely just him.
Bloom by name and bloom by nature, Alan was and always will remain a horticultural legend. The son of a market gardener from the age of 17, Alan devoted his life to growing plants and at Bressingham Hall he got the opportunity to put those plants together. He bred 170 plants, including Agapanthus Bressingham Blue and the fiery flowers of Crocosmia lucifer, and was awarded the RHS Victoria Medal. His burning passion was herbaceous perennials, a group of plants that provide the backbone of all our gardens today.
What do you mean by a herbaceous perennial? Well, it's a plant that comes every year, but during the winter it dies down. It's a very sound evolutionary development because our winters can be very, very cold, and most plants, of course, flower in the summer.
Perennials had long been the preserve of houses with grand gardens. Annual bedding plants were the choice for most of us gardeners. But Alan wanted everyone to see the potential of herbaceous perennials.
These were the sort of plants that Alan Bloom came to love. I think one of the things he probably loved most about them was the way that they change right the way through the year. So none of them are static. You get all these different rhythms and developments right the way through.
The planting design of the Dell Garden, created in the 1950s, has stood the test of time, thanks to an idea of Alan's, which continues to influence so many of our gardens.
Now, a traditional herbaceous border is a long, thin thing. Tall plants at the back, short plants at the front. That really didn't show him what these plants would do, nor did it inform any kind of aesthetic sensibility. It was just very straightforward and very boring. So he hit on this idea, totally revolutionary, of planting his plants in these great big island beds. It's particularly good for being able to view plants from all sides, and ideal for growing the plants he loved.
These beds are a living testament to the green fingers of Alan Bloom, who sadly died in 2005 at the age of 98. But his vision and legacy live on. Alan's son Adrian watched as his dad created the gardens. Joining the family nursery business in the mid-1950s, Adrian couldn't resist creating a garden of his own. It's a further 6-acre landscape with its own atmosphere and identity. The wonderfully named Foggy Bottom is like entering another garden. Here, there are shrubs and trees of all shapes and sizes.
It's worth coming up those stairs to see you.
Yes.
Lovely to see you.
Well,
and to see this. It's so different, this, from the Dell Garden, because everything here is surrounded by trees, and you take all your views from that backdrop, don't you?
well, that's true. I mean, a lot of years ago, over 50 years ago, in fact, we had a
Over
fence.
50 years ago?
Yeah, when we started.
Wow.
That makes you realise that you're not a youngster anymore. But the idea was to have these broad pathways running through either way, and so that you get the vistas,
Yeah.
and then fill them in with sort of changes through the season with perennials and various other things. But initially, the garden was mostly conifers and heathers, because that was the thing I was sort of collecting in the late 60s, early 70s,
Yeah.
I guess. Nobody knew much about them.
I mean, you're an authority on conifers.
Well, gardening with conifers anyway, yeah. I felt that, you know, there was a place in the garden for those. And at that time, also, it was about heathers and the year-round garden. It was really the year-round garden that was at the back of it all.
So it's lovely to see it from up here, but I won't see it at ground level.
Adrian's dream of creating a year-round garden has certainly been realised. His passion for conifers has been pivotal in this.
You can get an idea here of the variety of conifers that there are. You know, the greens, a more compact form, a pine that goes golden.
I like this one.
Well, I'm glad you did, because this is one that came up as a chance seedling in the garden, and
Yeah.
I thought it was rather different. I've called it Foggy Bottom Spider.
Oh, that's beautiful, isn't it? But it's still got an element of that.
And I think it has a sort of real natural effect.
It's quite unique, isn't it?
It is quite unique.
Yeah.
You're saying all the right things, Carol.
In autumn, this garden is full of surprises. Not only is it home to some really intriguing plants, but the way they're put together exemplifies why this garden is so special.
This is the pièce de résistance. It's absolutely lovely.
It's autumn at Bressingham Gardens, the home of horticultural royalty, the aptly named Bloom family. It's the life's work of Alan and Adrian Bloom. Adrian is a planting pioneer and the man responsible for creating and perfecting this 17-acre garden. The guiding principle of this garden has always been to show people the right plants for the right place, for any size of garden.
Of course, I know well enough that this is a very big garden, Carol, and I've always been trying to sort of show people who have smaller gardens that there's plantings in here that can be used in a small garden. So
that
I've
they
actually
can emulate.
That's right,
Yeah.
but these are mostly perennials and grasses.
Your whole family is known for promoting the very best of plants too. So, I mean, you're illustrating really that people should go for the best.
A lot of gardeners don't know the best plants, and they might go along to a garden centre in the spring, they'll see something in flower, looks fantastic, they'll buy it, and it actually may not do very well. So the idea is to give them success, if you like, in suggesting varieties that will work.
There's such lovely things in here. These hellebores are in flower already.
Yeah, it's very early, isn't it? But they'll go through till next April almost. And Begonia Bressingham Ruby, which will be purple in winter.
Yeah. Isn't that substantial and gorgeous?
It really
isn't
is,
it?
and pretty tough.
Yeah, really. Indestructible?
Just about, although if you tramped over it a bit, it probably wouldn't stand
Yeah, if you
up
had
too
a
well.
herd of elephants,
Yeah,
but I
that's
don't
right.
suppose you have many of those.
Not too many, no.
Bressingham showcases the very best of plants we can choose for our gardens. But one of Adrian's great skills is to put them together in planting schemes that seem to flow freely like rivers.
You can see the river running through the middle.
And it runs right the way through.
Yeah.
You want to see where it's going, don't you? How exciting.
It does sort of pull this together in a way.
Yeah, and it runs through and makes the most of these bigger trees everywhere, doesn't it?
Yes.
Curving through this border is a sea of Japanese bloodgrass, Imperator cylindrica rubra. It's the colour of autumn, and when combined with this blazing shrub, Nandina firepower, the whole scene glows.
How do you qualify to be considered for a river? You've got to be low-growing.
Which makes the river, and then to have plants either side,
Right.
so that they rise up as the banks, if you like, with the
The
heuchera
Rebecca
flowers.
and then
Yeah,
these
some
big,
repetition.
these big grasses.
They just frame the river itself and the other plants, and they change altogether with the weather. I mean, whether they're wet or whether you get the wind or the frost on them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Or the sunshine.
or the sunshine.
Yeah, we wish.
Yeah.
In this subdued light, this cornice midwinter fire just glows, this glorious golden foliage. And of course, it's got more to offer. Come the winter, there'll be red stems. But at the moment, it just leads you into this. Look at this. This is a millennia. It's probably a seedling from one called transparent. And that's exactly what happens here. You can see through these stems, and you see through them to this exciting shrub. This is Lespedeza thunbergii, and it's tumbling over this little red-leaved berberis. I think that's just such a beautiful combination. You've got those stems of agapanthus in between, separating the two. But this is the pièce de résistance. It's absolutely lovely.
This garden is about bringing out the best in plants. Adrian's artistry enables their special characteristics to shine through.
People feel very differently about autumn, don't they? Some people find it sad, others...
Yeah.
How about you?
It can be all things to all people in a way. You have your melancholy days in a way. Of course, you think of the autumn, and in England, it can be often pretty dull and no sun and this sort of thing, and that's when the colours show up the most. But to me, that autumn colour is emotional, more emotional than almost anything else in the year, potentially anyway, because it sort of just makes you stop and think, because it's such a fleeting point in the year, and it won't come every year with the same things.
But it's just a reminder that nothing is static and to enjoy the moment.
That's right, and the other thing is, if you know, and obviously there's a year-round garden is planned to look good in the winter, you don't have to be too sad about autumn.
No, you shouldn't be sad at all.
Making the most of the seasons and planning for the year ahead is top of the agenda here. So my winter visit is a wonderful prospect. It's a glorious January day. Bressingham's looking simply magnificent in its winter outfit. And there's no better place to start my visit than in the winter garden.
Adrian's whole mission in his garden is to ensure that the whole place is absolutely brilliant, full of colour all the year round.
It's a garden that delivers this wonderfully. The river of red grass in the autumn has been succeeded by a sea of snowdrops. And in amongst gently waving grasses, there are winter shrubs you feel you could warm your hands on.
Isn't this magnificent? This huge stand at the cornice. It's called Midwinter Fire, very aptly named. Its stems are sort of glowing gold at the base, and then they really catch alight with these brilliant red tips. And what's more, it mingles so beautifully with other plants. Look at it here with this lovely abies, this noble fir. It's bluey green, almost opposite on the colour spectrum to this bright orange here. And the two set each other off so wonderfully. I also love the way that that's got a kind of horizontal plateau-like presence, whereas these are upright, reaching for the blue winter sky.
The winter garden at Bressingham is packed full of brilliant ideas. It's a real showstopper.
A bit of winter work.
Oh, hi, Carol.
Hi.
Yeah, I was just making this entrance nice for you.
Well, most considerate of you.
No red carpet, but...
What is it?
Well, it's a weeping atlas cedar, Cedrus atlantica glauca pendula.
Right.
It does make sense, but...
So Atlas being the Atlas Mountains?
Yes, that's right,
Yeah.
from sort of Morocco. But it is pretty hardy through most of the UK. It's been trained up over an archway. I did that 12, 15 years ago, I suppose.
But you've got a double arch, haven't
Well,
you?
this one, yes, you can see why I'm pruning it. This is one that gives you a view through to the borders through there and Bressingham Hall in the distance.
Positively architectural. I love these little twinkles of white. Snowdrops are the epitome of this time of year.
This particular variety, S. Arnott, Sam Arnott, was given to me about 40 years ago, one clump out of somebody's garden, and I've continued to split it up, and all the ones that you're going to see all came from that one clump.
You couldn't have a better snowdrop than S. Arnott.
No.
It's got this beautiful honeyed perfume too, hasn't it?
Lovely, yeah.
And that's such a clever combination with the Ophiopogon. People call it black grass, but it's not a grass at all, is it?
No, it isn't. It's from the lily family, but it's evergreen or ever black, and the contrast you get with other plants is tremendous.
Very Art Deco combination.
Yeah.
Come on, I want to see some more.
Snowdrops shine brightly in any garden, but here these treats are set within a brilliant framework of colourful trees.
Look at the wealth of colour here, isn't there?
Yes, I think with the winter sun on it, it's very striking. You know, if you look up, you've got the different heights and colours and forms, which is what you've got in conifers, of course, but you notice them so much more now. So in the distance there, that's Xanthocarpus, better called green arrow, really.
Yeah.
It's
With these lovely sort of wafty arms.
There's an abies called golden spreader there.
Yeah, which is big and solid, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
It's a real pyramid. And then the very bright blue spruce, but these last three I have done some pruning to keep them keep the shape and keep them from getting too big.
Adrian's careful tree management is the key to the winter garden's backbone. But great swathes of the dell garden, laid out by Adrian's father, are taking a back seat this season.
Before Christmas, all of this is cut back, and it looks a bit like a graveyard at the moment.
And you can see what a herbaceous plant is. It's something that just dies right down.
Dies back.
Lives under the ground.
Yeah.
And then when we come in the spring, it'll all be
then
coming
you
up
get
again.
that resurgence.
The striking difference between these views and those in the winter garden brilliantly demonstrates Adrian's prioritising of the year-round garden.
It sort of tends to show you towards this part of the season the things that stand up to the wind, and I think with, say, miscanthus, the wonderful grasses that have these plumes.
But the miscanthus of all the grasses is the best one, isn't it, in terms of leaving it over winter and enjoying it?
Well, I think it is. I mean, we've got down to 2 or 3 varieties that we sort of concentrate on, those that really do overwinter. Some get very floppy very early.
Some of the best grasses for standing up to the cold winds of winter are the miscanthus.
What they do really is reflect the light. So you get the early morning winter light coming through these, and if you get frost or dew on them, it's absolutely magical. I mean, you can't help but stop at and look at
they're
them.
a photographer's favourite.
Well, that's true.
In those terms, with one of these hoar frosts all over them. So there are grasses and grasses, though, aren't there? I mean, the miscanthus, most of them are wonderful through the winter. But Molinias are a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, some of those really go down early, don't they? And therefore, you might say, don't have so much value in the garden. In fact, we've got 1 or 2 there, which we're cutting back at the moment. So I'm sure you could give us a hand.
Oh, yes, please.
You got some?
I roll my sleeves up.
OK.
In an island bed in the dell garden, these grasses are getting a timely chop.
This is Anya, already hard at work.
Yeah, I'd save some of that for me.
All right, then. Would you like to try?
We're making way for new growth in the spring. The winter's very much a time for work in the garden.
It's funny, isn't it? Because people used to think that, you know, the garden went to sleep during the winter.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, it's the busiest time, isn't
It's
it?
very busy, yeah.
Use shears or your hands to remove the old stems and then move in with secateurs. But be careful not to damage signs of new growth.
Once grasses and various other things start to look untidy, that's almost a good time. A good gauge is when you want to have it cut. If it looks good through the winter, leave it, you know. But in this case, yes, we didn't get it done.
Exactly. It's a bit like a hairdo, isn't it?
Yeah,
Tells you when you need one.
usually.
Grasses are an essential part of any border as a counterpoint to shrubs and other plants. Whether your garden's big or small, it's always worth giving them a go.
This Molinia is much more for the smaller garden. And you know it well enough, I'm sure, but Molinia cerulean variegator.
Right.
And it's quite compact, has sort of very light green and yellowish leaves, so it's attractive even before it flowers.
Yeah. You don't have to have a huge garden to have
No, that's right.
grasses at all.
The annual cycle of gardening is one of its great delights, and to play a small part in winter has been a real pleasure. Bressingham in its winter finest has been a feast for the eyes, and even in the depths of the season, there are still shrubs that are simply irresistible for their scent.
Isn't this lovely? I wish you could smell it, because it is absolutely scrumptious. In fact, it's too fragrant for scrumptious. It's utterly delightful. It's a Daphne. It's called Daphne Bellua Jacqueline Postil. And these come from the Himalayas originally, but they do very well in British gardens. Sometimes they're a bit tender, but this one seems to keep all its leaves and just do brilliantly well. And one of the reasons it does so is because Adrian prunes it really hard to keep it looking thick and bushy. And of course, the other consequence of that is you're getting lots more flowers, and the more the better with this fragrance. If I was going to have one winter flowering shrub that I was growing just for scent, I think it'd have to be this.
This is a scent that will forever remind me of my winter visit to Bressingham. But in a few months' time, the whole scene will have changed as this garden shifts into the spring, where so many seasonal delights lie in wait.
This is your chance to head to Devon to explore the beautiful Humphrey Repton Design Gardens at the Polizzi Collection's historic Hotel Ensley, hidden on the edge of Dartmoor. You could win a 3-night stay for 2 people, enjoying a tour of the extensive hotel gardens with the head gardener, picking up tips and enjoying the fabulous planting, woodlands and more. Included is a 3-course meal at the hotel restaurant, plus £1,000 prize money, which you could spend on your own garden. So, for the chance to win, text GARDEN to 65555. Or post your name and phone number to Garden 1, PO Box 7557, Derby, DE10NP. Text costs £2 plus 1 message at standard network rate. Lines close at midday on the date shown on screen and 3 working days later for postal entries. Rules and privacy policy at channel5.com/win.
In the county of Norfolk, in the far east of England, spring has arrived at Bressingham Gardens. This is a 17-acre garden, created and landscaped by the Bloom family, a horticultural dynasty with a passion for breeding and growing plants, and an expert eye for putting them together. From the tree house overlooking the garden, Foggy Bottom,
Well, welcome to Foggy Bottom in spring.
Adrian Bloom has a room with a view.
It's this time of year, actually, that you can really spot the shrubs which stand out, and the early shrubs like magnolias, which get into small trees, berberis, even rhododendrons.
One of the most iconic sights at this time of year are the blooms of magnolias, a sure sign that spring has sprung. Shining out are the goblet-like flowers of Magnolia Elizabeth. Unusually, rather than pink or white, they're a delicious buttery yellow, a real talking point, and much admired.
In this garden, it's all about the plants and the fact that they're coming into flower and showing up.
What can compare to camellias when they put on their show-stopping performance in the spring?
Well, I have to share this one with you. Camellia Donation is, to my mind, the best of all the camellias. And it's a good doer, a good grower. I pruned this hard back last year immediately after flowering. And look at the size of these flowers, which you can pick and bring indoors. And it goes on for weeks.
But spring at Bressingham isn't just about seductive and showy shrubs. Perennials like these pale pink dicentras abound on the woodland floor. They're at home in shade, and if they're given the right conditions, they'll form thriving colonies with ferny foliage and masses of drooping locket-shaped flowers. Away from Adrian's home garden at Foggy Bottom, the Dell garden created by Alan Bloom more than 60 years ago is bursting into bloom. Camellias and rhododendrons flank the Flint Bridge, and below them are drumstick primulas, aptly named with their spheres of purple flowers on long stems. This variety is Primula denticulata, Bressingham Beauty. Like so many plants in the gardens, it was bred here. Overhead, trees and shrubs create a breathtaking show, whilst at ground level, beautiful bulbs are bursting through the soil.
One of my favourite spring bulbs is China Duxa. And here it's making quite a show just in the breeze. And it's at the base next to an Ophiopogon, a black-leaved Ophiopogon. And as you move up, you can see the cornice behind, which we're about to cut back.
The cornice has completed its spectacular show. It was aflame when I visited during the winter. Now, action must be taken to guarantee the same superb show next winter.
So Andy's cutting back the cornice here, and it's going to make a show again next year, but you need to cut it back hard enough, as you can see.
Cornice looks great en masse, but it can thrive just as well in a pot. Whether it's in a container or in the ground, if you cut all or at least several of its stems hard back to the base each spring, it will reward you next year with a mass of fiery stems. You can use the prunings to make cuttings, just stick them in the ground. Spring treats abound, and amongst them are some true treasures. Trilliums are extra special, with mottled green foliage and flowers in pure white or rich ruby red. As woodland plants, trilliums are happiest living in shady corners. They're intriguing plants, with everything in threes. It's no surprise to see them thrive here in spring. They provide a tantalising prelude to the delights of summer. The gardening year has almost come full circle. Summer has arrived. Everywhere there are islands of the finest plants and landscapes to lose yourself in. You're reminded of the Bloom family's devotion to growing an astonishing variety of plants and displaying them in the best possible ways.
When Alan Bloom first conceived of these gardens, it was very much as a place to test out and showcase all these wonderful herbaceous perennials on which he was working. Since then, he's passed the baton on to his son Adrian, and he's really run with it.
As far as the eye can see, Bressingham's summer borders stretch into the distance. Immaculate lawns sweep around beds brimming with the best shrubs, grasses and perennials. In a series of island beds next to the winter garden is the aptly named summer garden, laid out by Adrian in 2001.
You've got lots of repetition here. This beautiful courted area, the pampas grass, is repeated as a sort of motif. Punctuation mark after punctuation mark all the way down through the bed. But rather than everything being in quite tight clumps and next to each other, plants wander off into the distance. You'll have things like glorious geranium roseanne. It goes right the way over and flows through this whole bed. Geranium roseanne has to be one of my favourite plants of all time. And it's not just me that likes it. In 2013, it was voted Plant of the Centenary in an RHS public vote. One of its very best qualities is the fact that it flowers almost continuously, sometimes from mid-May right the way through till October or so. And it produces lots and lots of flowers. It's floriferous. And that's because it's actually a sterile hybrid, so it doesn't set any seed. Now, once a plant has set seed, it's really achieved its purpose. So its further flowering isn't going to be as good. And that's why we deadhead things to keep them flowering. But in this case, you don't need to do it because the plant does it for itself. It just produces flower after flower after flower.
It's no surprise that the nation's favourite plant is a perennial, the kind of plant that Alan Bloom championed throughout his life. He and his assistant, Percy Piper, bred some of the greatest summer perennials. Here in the Dell Garden, the display is dazzling.
The salvia, the deep purple blue over there, the spikes of those against the flat of the Achillea gold plate, I think that one is. I mean, that is very dramatic just in itself.
It's very dramatic. Herbaceous perennials are one of my favourite groups of plants, and I know you love them too.
Well, I certainly do. I was brought up with them, of course, and my father, Alan Bloom, was the one who instigated the whole perennial revolution, if you like. So take crocosmias, for instance. We're actually looking at Lucifer there, which was introduced by this nursery years ago. It's really an attractive foliage plant, even before it flowers. And
Yeah,
then you
long
get
before
these
it flowers.
sort of fairly narrow sort of stems. Then they curve over, and the buds, before they open, are really quite a deep colour.
Yeah.
Then they gradually open down the stem and get bigger and bigger, and then they're spectacular as a whole.
Historically, this has always been a garden where new plants have been introduced and tried out, but that continues, doesn't it?
Yes, I think my father and Percy Piper set the bar rather high with the introductions they made many years ago.
Yeah.
But Jamie, who's been here 25 years, he's now been recently doing quite a lot of hybridizing with two of the species or genera that my father was involved with, which was Crocosmia and also Kniphofia. And you'll see examples of some of his selections in the gardens under a code name at the moment. But
They've all got
just
a
to see,
number.
yeah, they've all got a number, which changes every week.
What a thrilling process to be part of. The Bloom plant breeding legacy lives on. Adrian's son-in-law, Jamie Blake, is not only the head gardener, but he's also an avid plant breeder.
I can't believe you're finding any weeds in there, you know. It all looks so gorgeous, it really does.
Yes, well, it is really overall, but of course, you know, I end up looking for the weeds. You'll know what it is.
If you came to mine, you'd find plenty. So would you say that creating or breeding new plants is one of the most exciting parts of your job?
It is, without a doubt. It's a huge buzz. It is sowing seed and seeing what's going to come along.
Yeah.
And it sort of started in a fairly sort of simple way with me just collecting seed of, say, for instance, Kniphophias, which I love, and they were a passion of Alan and Percy Piper, his helper. Most people who start hybridizing plants, looking at things, they look at them, they're their own babies, so they're looking at them with their mother's eyes.
Yeah.
And a mother will always think that their baby's beautiful. And for all the buzz that I might get over my own hybridizing, if I see people looking at my plant,
Yeah.
gosh, that's a massive winner, that is.
This garden breeds marvellous plants and modest gardeners. My autumn visit started with a late Kniphofia, and here we are in summer, standing next to an early variety, bred by Jamie to be superb.
Foliage short down out of the way,
Yeah.
because I don't want that in amongst the flowers. Nice long flowering stems, an intermediate kind of height. One of the other big problems with them is they tend to not flower to the top of the spike, as you'll know.
Yeah, they're
And
dead
this-
in one place
Yeah,
before they
horrible
open at
brown bit at the top. This doesn't do that. It's an elegant shape. And the other thing is, which is really important for all of us, but particularly in plants, is it dies well.
Yes.
And you must die well. The dying well thing means that the flowers at the bottom of the spike, which are going over, they don't detract, the colour doesn't detract from the overall impression of the plant.
Well, it's beautiful and a fine example of this wonderful work.
With Jamie in charge here, the plant breeding of borders are in safe hands. My year at Bressingham exploring a plethora of perfect plants is drawing to a close, but not before I get the chance to visit a wood filled with gentle giants.
Imagine growing a seed, cultivating a little tiny plant, and knowing that in 60 years' time, this is what you're going to get.
Remember, there's still the chance to head to Devon for a 3-night stay for 2 at Hotel Ensley. Your stay will include a 3-course meal at the hotel's restaurant and £1,000 prize money too. So to enter, text GARDEN to 65555 or post your name and phone number to Garden 1, PO Box 7557, Derby DE10NP. Rules and privacy policy at channel5.com/win.
Bressingham Gardens in midsummer is a sight for sore eyes. It's the masterpiece of the Bloom family, where they've created a landscape devoted to glorious plants. I'm heading to one of the oldest parts of the garden. Adrian's Wood is an arboretum of towering trees and shade-loving plants.
60 years ago, in fact, in the 60s, Adrian planted this wood entirely with plants of a North American origin. Wherever you look, there are these glorious plants, nearly all grown from seed. Things like this Lysimachia ciliata with its little yellow starry flowers and bronze foliage. And there are hydrangeas galore. But it's not until you look up that you realise the extent of Adrian's vision. These are Sequoiadendron giganteum, the giant redwood, and Adrian raised them himself from seed that he'd collected in the USA. Imagine growing a seed, cultivating a little tiny plant, and knowing that in 60 years' time, this is what you're going to get. They haven't finished growing either. They're going to carry on, reaching for the sky. What a wonderful, wonderful idea to imagine this and to actually bring it into existence.
Redwoods are renowned for reaching incredible heights. They can live for over 2,000 years, and the tallest has been recorded at 375 feet.
At least this is something I can hug.
There's something about this garden that really envelops you. It feels so special. It spreads across the landscape in rivers of plants and islands of colour.
There's so much to take in and so many beautiful views. That's lovely, through there with those windows.
In a corner of Foggy Bottom, one of the smaller trees needs some TLC. And with Adrian wielding a pruning saw, I'm delighted to lend a hand.
It's a beautiful tree.
It is, isn't it? And that's nearly 50 years old. And it was Pinus coriensis Winton as the name, which you don't often see. But if you imagine this as it would be if I hadn't pruned it at all, it would be to the ground and probably 30 feet across.
Right.
Would just be a blob, say.
A blob.
Yeah, and not very interesting. So by pruning it up, I managed to keep the tree, get nice views through it, and it retains its interest.
I think sometimes people think that once they've planted a tree, that's it. It's just going to do its thing. But you can alter so much.
So if you could grab that one, it doesn't matter at this stage if you just cut through from one side.
Quite heavy.
Yeah, right. That was testing you out. If you cut back bigger branches, and that goes for many sorts of trees, further back without undercutting it this way, then of course it will split.
Rip.
And you don't want that.
No, you don't.
So,
Also, it's completely squashes Heather and possibly me.
Absolutely. Well, can you manage that?
Yeah, I'm going to cancel my gym membership.
There we go, short one.
Is there ever a circumstance, Adrian, when you've finished something and you actually think, not sure whether I should have done that?
Yes. No regrets one has to have.
Oh,
yes,
look at that.
I think it works, doesn't it?
Oh, it definitely does.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. You can see not just through to the front of the other bed, but far beyond it.
Yes, you can, can't you? And it opens up possibilities.
You've maintained that lovely globe shape, haven't you? And yet, it's so elegant. I'm glad I played a very small...
Yeah, well, we will always remember, and we might even have a little plaque that Carol...
Carol made a home here.
Few places can claim to have shaped the gardening habits of a nation so enduringly as Bressingham, pioneered first by Alan Bloom and now by Adrian. Together, they innovated and popularised a style of gardening that's not only inspiring, but beautiful.
Adrian's eye for innovative planting, his insistence on top plant quality, and his far-sightedness, together with the dedication of his team, have imbued these beautiful gardens with true love. That's what makes Bressingham a great British garden.
Research. More Great British Gardens new next Monday at 9. From its royal residence to exquisite decor, take an exclusive tour of Kensington Palace behind closed doors, brand new Thursday at 7. And tonight we're taking a peek inside one of London's most legendary hotels as we uncover secrets of the Ritz Hotel next.